Okay, it looks like we're live. Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us at the Oxford Climate Research Showcase tonight. We're really excited to have you all here and to see so many people interested from across students, across disciplines. We even have some public and alum here, so it's going to be a real mixing pot of everyone coming together. We've been working literally around the clock to try and bring this all together and to get so many amazing researchers, and quite literally as well, because our team is working remotely from 3 different time zones at the moment. So this has been a real round-the-clock effort. So we really want to encourage you today to speak to as many people as possible, especially outside your traditional background zones and across disciplines. You've got about an hour after the opening talks, really to mix and mingle and have some novel conversations that you wouldn't otherwise have happened. So please do get stuck in. So a little about me. I'm Tristram. I'm just the starting Oxford Climate Research Network Coordinator, which is quite a mouthful, but it's bringing in together everyone from around Oxford to coordinate the collaborations and efforts of everything happening on climate in Oxford at the moment. And a little bit about OCRN. So the world's changing climate and the threats and opportunities it affords are one of the biggest issues facing society today. At Oxford, we have more than 200 researchers who are rising to the challenge to seek and understand what is causing climate change, what are the impacts, and what we can do about it. The University of Oxford's OCRN responds to these challenges, building upon the university's existing and emerging climate research excellence. The OCRN is a cross-divisional research community, harnessing Oxford's diverse strengths to address the challenge of managing climate change in a complex and uncertain world. The network aims to develop a research agenda to address key challenges of a changing climate, deepen knowledge to inform policy and planning, and develop instruments to improve practice in partnership with government, research and business communities. So today we've brought together everyone from across departments and disciplines and silos, as I said before, and we're so thrilled that today we've got Miles Allen, who'll be giving a brief overview talk from the social science, not the social sciences, from the physical sciences side, and then we've got Amanda and Nyanika, who'll be speaking expertly to the side of social sciences and humanities. So without further ado, I'll introduce Miles. So Miles is the leader of the Oxford Climate Research Programme, and his research focuses on how human and natural influences on climate contribute to observed climate change and risks of extreme weather, and then quantifying the implications for long-range climate forecasts. He has a whole host of other titles, but we'd be here all day. So over to you, Miles.
Well, thanks, Tristram. And actually, I've realised there must be some website which is out of date, because I certainly wouldn't want to describe myself as the leader of an Oxford climate research programme. I'm one of many in Oxford who work on climate change and climate related issues. In fact, I remember when I was first appointed as junior faculty in the Department of Physics, I think it was back in 2000, there were apparently some conversations at the time that I was working on this fashionable new issue of human-induced climate change. And was this a bit of a risk for the Department of Physics to take somebody on in this area? You know, what if it didn't work out? What if it turned out to be a non-issue? Anyway, it's interesting to think that wasn't that long ago. Of course, since then, the Oxford's involvement and engagement with the issue of human-induced climate change has really expanded. We are, by many measures, actually, the UK's leading university on climate research, but it's often not that obvious to other people, because it's not all brought together into one place, into one department. We don't have a environmental sciences department here. I think that's a good thing, that research on these issues happens in traditional departments, because it brings in the skills we need from different disciplines. In fact, I often slightly wince at the epithet climate scientist. I don't really think climate science is not a special kind of science. I'm a scientist who happens to study climate change, but the techniques I use, the tools I use, are much the same as any other scientist uses. So I was working, just to sort of give you through what I've been doing, an idea of how climate research has blossomed in the university over the past 20 years. There was, of course, already quite a lot of work on climate going on in the university when I joined the faculty here. So we've had people working on various aspects of natural climate variations, really since the 70s and earlier. We've also had a very strong record in observing our climate system, and a lot of that was led out of the Department of the Subdepartment of Atmospheric, Oceanic and Planetary Physics in the Physics Department. And we've had a very strong program in responding to the challenges of environmental change, which has been led from the Environmental Change Institute in the based now in the School of Geography and the Environment. Sorry about the noises off. That was badly timed. Anyway, the thank you. So you can all have a good laugh at my disorganization there. These days, the climate issue spans a whole host of departments in mathematical and physical and life sciences, and of course spans across into the social sciences and humanities. But the Amanda and Nanika will speak to those divisions. A very important research goes on in understanding how our oceans respond to climate change in both physics and earth sciences. And as well in earth sciences, of course, we have lots of research going on the fundamentals of what happens to Earth's climate over geological timescales, also where we get these greenhouse gases from underground and where they might eventually end up. And likewise in zoology, we've got a lot of research going on around the solutions to climate change, nature-based climate solutions, how we can take carbon back out of the atmosphere using the biosphere, and store it in various forms and different ways. So these are all themes that you can pick up on in the tables as you circulate around the room. We obviously really encourage you to go and take up these conversations with different researchers across Oxford, and take this opportunity. And I'd like to thank Tristram and his team, of course, for putting this together, because I'm really looking forward to wandering around these tables and finding out all the many different things. I'm sure I'll learn plenty this afternoon about what's happening in Oxford and climate, because there's so much going on that it's impossible for anybody to keep it in their head. It is just important to wrap up. If you want to find out about what's going on in Oxford, do go to the climate.ox.ac.uk website. The Oxford Climate Research Network maintains a list of all the academics who are working in the climate area, and there's also now links there through to research going on in social sciences and humanities, and that's ably coordinated by Tristram and of course Helen Johnson, who's the academic coordinator. Helen Johnson in Earth Sciences, an oceanographer, who I hope is here tonight as well, who's the academic coordinator of the Oxford Climate Research Network, is the way we sort of draw all this work together. So that's probably enough from me, because the main point of this evening is getting you to talk to each other and to talk to the people at the different booths. But welcome, and thanks very much for joining us. Back to you, Tristram.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Miles. It's actually really interesting hearing about you saying that you're not necessarily thinking of yourself as a climate scientist, but just a scientist full stop who is happening to be focusing on climate change. It's a really interesting framing. Okay, so next up, we have Nayanika Mathur and Amanda Power. So Nayanika is an associate professor in the anthropology of South Asia, and she has wide-ranging research and teaching interests in the anthropology of politics, development, environment, law, human animal studies, and research methods, so quite a lot. And then Amanda Power is the Sullivan Clarendon Associate Professor in History. She is a historian of religion, power, and intellectual life in medieval Europe. She's been involved in developing the field of global medieval history and taking new approaches to historical study that speak to concerns of the mounting climate environmental crisis. Just about a year ago, they got together to start bringing in social sciences and humanities together on work on climate. And I was very privileged to be a part of some of those early conversations. And it's really exciting to see how that's developed over the year. So you're very, very welcome. And over to you two.
Okay, I'm going to start, and then Nandika's going to follow on. So what we thought we might talk about is, first of all, it's probably not the case that humanities, especially, and probably even many kinds of social science researchers, would have been invited to an event like this a few years ago. And I don't think that to many people it's still clear why you'd invite a medieval historian to a climate crisis event. So I think that it's worth just saying a little bit about that to be clear, first of all. So I think the way I've been thinking about this for a while, but the way I'd come to formulate it increasingly is that scientists have very convincingly demonstrated that climate change is anthropogenic in its causes. And so there's a kind of wide-ranging acknowledgement that it is human activity that's causing climate change, and particularly human activity that's turned it into a climate crisis. And yet I think that analysis tends to stop there. So we all, it's agreed that humans are causing this, and we are very familiar with the sort of imagery around that, the factories and the cars and the deforestation and all the things that humans are doing. But I'm not sure that we step back enough that traditionally we've stepped back enough to work out why humans are doing that. And of course, there are all sorts of reasons for why humans are acting as they are. So I think that there has been a tendency in climate research to take human activity as an explanation rather than something that needs to be explained itself. I heard someone give a paper last year talking about the need to look at to factor human activity into tipping points, so that you had human tipping points as well as more kind of physical tipping points. And that's it's a kind of a sciencey way of looking at it, but it's quite a useful thing to think with as well. So I think that it needs to be recognised that climate change is being produced by human values, human priorities, ongoing human inequalities, very long entrenched systems of human thought and human systems of power, and the ways that humans have produced and valued knowledge over the centuries. So what we have is, I'm speaking as a historian, and other disciplines might emphasize it a bit differently, but to me it seems that we have incredibly long, complex histories that have shaped and entrenched our current predicament. And it affects very much the capacity of different regions and populations to respond or adapt. And I'm not just talking about the global south in the aftermath of European colonialism, but I'm talking even more in a way about the inability of populations in the global north to understand and accept and adapt to what their own scientists, in a sense, are telling them. And I think understanding the reasons for that is becoming increasingly obvious that telling people what's happening is not working, and that we need to bring in a much broader disciplinary background to both climate research, I think, and also policy formulation, education of the next generation, and the general sort of understanding about what's creating and the situation making it so very difficult to address. I think insofar as humanities expertise in particular has been considered, it's been thought of as a form of translation, so communicating scientific findings to wider audiences. But I would like to propose that the scientific findings will probably be enhanced and made a good deal more potent and richer if humanities research is actually taken on board by people working in the sciences. So just very briefly, because Ninika is going to take up how we've worked on this in Oxford. I think that in the universities, the effort to build up in disciplines that haven't traditionally been involved in climate research, to try and build up the research profiles and the methodologies and the new directions that are needed to enable us to contribute meaningfully to academic research and also to policy and public discussions, does require in many cases very significant shifts in disciplinary emphases and ways of approaching what matters about our field. Humanities subjects in particular have spent so long being told that they're not relevant to public conversations and that they're ivory tower stuff that a lot of people, I fear, have internalized that. So we're also, I think, needing to build up new disciplinary confidence in subjects that haven't been included in these conversations before. It's a very exciting opportunity for interdisciplinarity. And so particularly, I think humanities and social science people have been working with each other's ideas, but I think emerging conversations with climate scientists and others who are producing, I guess, new data that affects our fields has been very rich and is something to keep building on. So historical climate data, historical environment data radically changed my field, and we're sort of still trying to work out what we make of that. But there are already secure interdisciplinary fields to address these things, such as environmental humanities. And I think, if it's all right with you, Nainika, I'll hand over to you now to talk about the next step.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for that, Amanda. And thanks, Tristan, for organizing this and inviting us to talk over here. So I'm just going to pick up a sort of a thread that was there in Amanda's talk, and I'm going to talk about it in context of this research network that the two of us co-convene at Torch and the Oxford Martin School. And I want to just talk a bit about some of the challenges we faced, why we thought this network was important, and also just a few case studies of sort of fun things or interesting things that we think we've accomplished in the past year. So I think Amanda has already has very strongly articulated why the humanities and the social sciences need to engage in climate change research. She's also made the point that the certain disciplines, such as, say, a certain form of history or a certain form of literature or a certain form of politics that isn't considered to be the appropriate discipline to be speaking on climate change. I found it interesting when Miles said that when he started at Oxford, what he was doing was considered rather quaint. Climate change was considered slightly abstruse or slightly niche in a way. And I think what I want to talk about is actually how do we get the humanities and the social sciences, or all these varied disciplines, to come together and actually work and think intellectually together and produce a form of knowledge that we think the climate crisis really demands. So one of the big assumptions or presumptions on which we are working collaboratively at this point is that no one discipline, whether it's history or anthropology, I'm an anthropologist myself, or sociology or politics, can just on its own necessarily produce the kind of knowledge that we perhaps might need in this moment to really think about the climate crisis in stronger, starker terms. Amanda has already made the point that one of the big problems that we see with climate change research is that it is considered the preserve of the physical sciences or the natural sciences, right? So it's climate science, and all that our work as humanities or social scientists is relegated to, sort of translating it or communicating it in some way, rather than actually working with or sometimes even against climate science to produce novel forms of knowledge, or to make us rethink how how the climate crisis has occurred in the first place. And what we're trying to do here in Oxford is a very small sort of a little effort to try to get together a bunch of people. And we have grad students, we have postdoctoral students, we have senior faculty, we have junior faculty, etc. We have undergrads as well who are part of this research network, to quite literally sit around a table and think about the ways in which our disciplines can respond to the climate crisis. I'm going to just give two examples in a minute of the kinds of projects we've taken up. But before I do that, I want to just make a couple of points about why this exercise of sitting around a table and discussing the climate crisis seems so radical in Oxford. It seems like this is almost an unachievable task. I know there's some fantastic initiatives, largely led by students, such as the Oxford Climate Research Network, that we're sort of all part of today, that is trying to do this work. But I think, we need to do much more of this kind of intellectual and political and institutional labor within Oxford to make climate research as robust as it actually can be, given the kind of talent we have here amongst the student body as well as amongst faculty. So just sort of 2 points I want to make on the difficulties of this, and then I'm going to give you a couple of case studies of interesting things that we think we've been doing as just, not to advertise a network, but more to think about what we can do when we actually come together and collaborate. So I think the first difficulty really has been, as I said, Amanda has already said that, certain disciplines are not considered appropriate disciplines to be speaking on climate change. But I think in addition to that, I think there is a problem in the way in which the social sciences and humanities disciplines proceed, where as you sort of become more of, say, an anthropologist, it is your expertise in that micro field, in fact, a subfield within it, the dexterity with which you can argue certain methodological or historical or political points within your discipline, which is what gets you kudos, right? That's the way in which you progress in a particular discipline. So for me as an anthropologist, I'm not sure that I'm going to get brownie points for being able to speak on politics or physics or, trying to get in all these, or literature and music, etc., and get them together and then make some sort of a novel contribution. I think the expectation is that I deepen my understanding of that particular discipline. Now, one of the ways in which the climate crisis and the new literature in the Anthropocene unsettles this long-standing tradition of the ways in which academic expertise is accumulated is by completely upsetting the forms of knowledge and the disciplinary silos within which we work. So, for instance, on my current work, which is on human-animal relations in India and the climate crisis, I found it impossible to just stick to ethnography. I think of myself as an ethnographer. I champion anthropology as a discipline. I'm deeply committed to it as a discipline, but I can see the massive shortfalls of just sticking to anthropology and not, for instance, sticking in history, not looking at animal biology, not thinking of geography, not thinking of chemistry. I mean, getting in all these other disciplines to come together. But unfortunately, one is the way in which disciplinary knowledge proceeds. But I think we have to sort of discuss the institutional setup at Oxford itself, which also, with its famed decentralization, with this sort of anarchic traditions of work in Oxford that we all seem to celebrate in this slightly problematic way, it becomes impossible to speak across departments, across divisions. We just don't have the political or the institutional apparatus for that. And to do this kind of work that, say, Amanda and I are doing, the Oxford Climate Research Network is doing, some of these other really exciting initiatives in Oxford are doing currently, requires enormous amount of energy, and it requires this particular kind of time and commitment and labor that very few of us actually have. And so I do think that we need to really think about the way in which Oxford as a university is set up, the kinds of research it rewards, the ways in which departments and divisions function, pretty much the administrative bureaucracy of it, and the ways in which that unsettles or disallows certain forms of conversations to happen. So with that, I'm going to just sort of maybe, to end on a happy note, to say that, actually we can have these interesting collaborations. I'm going to just really quickly talk about two things that our network has done. And I think that, these are very much in initial stages. We hardly have any funding for it. We've literally just done it. We have crazy jobs, but in addition to that, we're sort of doing it while burning the midnight oil. But, these are hopeful ways in which we can respond to the climate crisis. The first is this collaboration that we've set up with people from our network here in Oxford, which, as I said, is very interdisciplinary, and the Berlin University of Art, where we're working collaboratively with young artists, student artists there, to produce a project which we're calling Animal Eyes on the Planet. So one of the ways in which we're trying to work together is to think about the ways in which the climate crisis emerges from this deep anthropocentrism, where it is, anthropocenic accounts of the world that have led to the crisis that we're in. And we're trying to think of alternate ways in which we can imagine this world, the ways in which we can see this world, visually depict the world. And so one of the things we want to do is work with artists to think about the ways an animal might, a non-human animal might talk about the planet or might talk about life over here. So how does a tiger in India think about, this contemporary moment? What does it see? What would happen if we sort of switched the perspective away from this anthropocenic thinking to think from the non-human? The other thing which we're doing, which, is that we're sitting around a table and we're trying to write joint papers. Whether this is on what happened with COVID-19, the pandemic, and the ways in which discipline should respond to it, or how do we sort of think about method and interdisciplinarity. And we're trying to get people from many different disciplines to sit together quite literally in a room. Well, it used to be a physical room before the pandemic hit, but now we're trying to do it in a Zoom room, and write and think together on the climate crisis. As I said, these are just sort of very early initiatives, and we don't know where they'll go, but I just wanted to end with them as examples of what we can do in Oxford. Also, just to sort of end by saying that there's incredible research, there's incredible sort of, student body, incredible political momentum around the climate crisis here. I just wish we could find a way for all of us to actually do the kind of critical collaborative work that this moment requires of us. So thanks.
Would you mind if I just chipped in at the end here? I know it's slightly out of sequence, but just to say that in response to what both Amanda and Nika were talking about, the need for cross-divisional initiatives and so on, I can give you a sneak pre-announcement of the fact, and the logo behind me is a bit of a giveaway. Oxford, it's going to get announced on Monday, but I'm telling you now, Oxford is investing quite a substantial amount of our own money, the university's own money, into a new initiative, Oxford Net Zero, which is bridging all divisions, social sciences, humanities, and mathematical and physical life sciences, to think about, in particular, the human dimensions of how we're going to achieve net zero. Because that's and we're really sort of looking to reach out to everybody who's interested in this challenge in the university, and get a whole new cross-divisional research program going there. So that's a new and very exciting initiative that I encourage any of you come and find me at a table if you want to know more about it, or go to netzeroclimate.org, where you can see a lot of what we're trying to pull together at very high speed. There's been a great team working on that site, because we're recognizing the world's decided to get to net zero before being quite clear what net zero means. And so the academic community has a lot of work to do to make sure that we focus all this energy as best we can onto actually achieving that goal. Looking forward to talking to all and any of you more about that in the next hour or so, but also the weeks ahead. Sorry to interrupt, Tristram.
No. Thank you so much, everyone. That was really, really insightful and so interesting to hear from the different perspectives at Oxford, everything that's going on. And yeah, as Miles and Nani and Amanda were saying, we're going to be working really, really hard to try and challenge some of the challenges in bringing all the disciplines together. And it's a real focus for this coming year, certainly for me. I know many of the people that we're going forwards with, into making sure that this really happens. And it's not just an extra add-on, but really centralized in climate conversations. Very quickly, if you are a researcher and you want to keep involved, you can join the Oxford Climate Research Network at the link that we posted. If you're not a researcher, unfortunately, this is a specifically research network, but Oxford Climate Society are here for all the non-researchers, and they have great stuff going on that you can get involved with. Thank you so much to the speakers and to Maria, Izzy, and Helen, who've been working around the clock with me to put on this event. It wouldn't have happened without you. Now, so the event is going to be open officially for another hour. For you to all to move between the tables and get to know each other and have novel conversations between research groups. Nainik and Amanda are both going to be on tables, as Miles said. He'll be around, and Helen is also joining on one of the physical oceanography tables. The space will be open for a while longer. Typically, when we've hosted events like this, people have been very hesitant to leave at the official time. So leave when you're able to or you want to, and we'll just keep this rolling for as long as possible. So now, thanks again. Please have great conversations, and I'll see you around in the lounge.
Thank you, Tristram.